All right, so we want to modify our index page to display not just the nav bar, but to display all of the journal entries. So we need to go back to under server routes, router.js. Here is the code here's the function that gets executed when the user requests the index page. We need to do something more than that. So let's modify this slightly. So before we render the index page, we need to basically get all of our journal entries past that array of journal entries to the render function, and then modify the EJS page to display that stuff nicely. So we've written some code to save data into MongoDB. Now we're going to write code to get data out of MongoDB, which really completes the whole process. So let's create a variable called entries, and we're going to find all of the journal entries in the database. So this is very common. Oh, I've got that same error we had before. I'm using the await keyword inside of a function that's not asynchronous. So I need to go up here and add the async keyword. That takes care of that. All right, so this is why we learned the map function, to be honest. We're going to convert MongoDB objects to objects formatted for the EJS template. It's really common to have to do some sort of to do a map from what we get out of Mongo into what we actually want for our web app. So I'm going to call this formatted entries, my variable. And this will be similar to what we did earlier in this unit. I'm going to do entries.map. And the single argument we pass to map is an arrow function, which takes one parameter, which is each entry that has been returned from Mongo. And we're going to return a JavaScript object with the following properties. The ID of the object is going to be entry._ID. You may remember when we first learned about MongoDB, I said every document has a unique identifier, and the name of that property is _ID. It's created automatically when we create new documents. We're going to use that so we can uniquely reference different journal entries. We're going to want the date, but we want the date formatted like in a nice human readable format. We don't want like capital T and like colons and all of that. So we're going to say entry.date, and then we're going to invoke the toLocale date string method. What this does is it converts the date to a string, and a string in the current locale. The current locale reflects both the time zone and it reflects the conventions of like the country we're in. So we tend to make our dates like month, day, year. In Europe, a lot of times it's day, month, year. This reflects all of that. Competency, we're going to say entry.competency, and then content. On our index page, someone might type in a really long journal entry. We only really want a snippet of it displayed. So I'm going to say entry.content, and then I'm going to use the slice function on the string. And I'm just going to grab the first 20 characters, and then I'm going to concatenate like ... after that. So that way we just get the first 20 characters of their journal entry as opposed to the whole thing. Yeah.
The journal entry is, or the content is less than 20.
Oh, it's okay. It'll just like include the whole thing and then still put the ... there. We could write more sophisticated code to like check that if we wanted. We'll leave that as an exercise for later. So, yeah. So this is the first time we're going from a date object to a string. The other time we were going from like the date object from the HTML and just making sure it was represented as date time for time zone issues. But this is the first time we've ever displayed a string to the user. So it's just because of the direction we're going from date object to string. We haven't ever yet gone from string to date object. So, I mean, I guess technically the code we added at the start where we concatenated the time zone, that basically was creating a date time string. And then we were using that as the argument to creating a new date object. So I guess that was going the other way. So last thing, now that we have this list, this array, we're going to pass that as an argument to our EJS file. So the variable within the EJS file will be entries. We're going to pass formatted entries there. So now we can refer to this variable entries within index.ejs. So let's update this. We recently just redid our nav bar. So below that, let's create another div element of class entries. So that will allow us to style everything inside of here. This is another example of us generating HTML dynamically within our EJS file. So we're going to use our EJS tag less than % to write some JavaScript flow code. So for let entry of entries. So we're going to have a for loop inside the for loop. So for each entry, we're going to create another div. And inside of there, we're going to say entry.date. So we're referring to that variable that we passed into the render function. So we want the date first. After the date, we want, let's do a div of class entry competency. That will allow us to do some styling for this. And we'll do entry.habit. And then we need the content. So we'll do div class entry content. Lots of very specific characters. I know it's kind of a pain. So we'll do that variable. That a little bit easier to read. Oh, and then we want like a little button so the user can click on the entry to edit it. So that'll be our final div element. And this will be an href, just like we did before in our nav bar. We're going to go to the page edit entry, but we need to know like which entry to edit. So we're going to add to the path here the entry ID. So this is what we're using the ID for. It's a nice, unique way to refer to a given entry. We want this to have a roll of button just like we used before, but we're going to give it a class called secondary. So this is leveraging the Pico CSS stuff that's included in here for us. And then we're going to name this thing edit. Let me save that so it gets wrapped a little bit better. Actually, it looks awful. All right, div. We need to somewhere here, I got to end our for loop right here. There we go. That will end our for loop. So now you can refresh your index page. And you can see that it won't look quite right. We're going to actually just pause here. We'll refresh it tomorrow. We need to add some CSS code for this class entries and then specifically for these two as well. We'll do a little bit more flex stuff for that. And then we'll add a little bit of code to handle when they actually click on this, when they actually go to this page. But we'll start class with that tomorrow. It'll take just a few minutes. And then I'll introduce the summative lab. We're going to pick up where we left off. So just to review where we did leave off, we made the method associated with getting the root endpoint here asynchronous because we're now finding all of the journal entries. We're mapping them to our own array of JavaScript objects with properties ID, date, competency, and content, specifically formatted for display in HTML. That's the purpose of doing this. And then we're passing those along tied to the variable entries in the EJS file. So then we went to the EJS file and we primarily focused on adding this div block here where we iterate through every entry. We have a bunch of different divs for the date, the competency, the content. We added a button, a secondary button for editing, and all of these are different divs, but we haven't done any styling yet, nor have we handled this button at all. So we're going to do both of those now to wrap this up. So let's go up to, in the assets folder under CSS or the styles. Yesterday we did some work with our nav bar, the top bar here. We're going to add a couple more of these focused on the entry class. So for the entry class, we're again going to use the Flexbox display model, which is the same model we use for our nav bar. We're going to focus on how we want. So we have rows of entries. So our flex direction is going to be row. That's the orientation that we're interested in. We don't want these rows to wrap. So we're going to set flex wrap to no wrap. Oh, sorry, that's flex dash wrap is the right property. We're going to set justify content to flex start. And again, we have not done much with Flexbox, but there are some good extension resources related to that. And there's one is an interactive web page where you can change these different settings, so you can experience what if I change the direction from row to column? What if I change the wrap? What if I change the justify? And for me, I found that super useful to be able to interact with it very efficiently. Align items we want. Align items. We're going to set to center. We're going to set a gap of 10 pixels. That will look good. And then we're going to set a border, a black border, 1 pixel solid around our items. So this provides styling for everything within the div element as a whole, which includes the date, the competency, the content, and the button. In index.ejs, we did add a specific class for the competency and the content. So we can have additional styles for those, which we're going to do. What do we call those? I forget. Entry competency. So let's create a rule for entry competency. And this is basically a way of saying we want to preserve a certain amount of space for this. So we're going to set what's called flex basis to 200 pixels. That will keep, even as we resize our window, we'll make sure that we can always read the competency, which will be nice. And then based on the size of the window, if we have extra space, we want the extra space to go to the content piece. So we'll do entry.content, and we'll say flex grow 1. With these changes, if you start your server and start your client and go to the index page, you should now see a much better formatted index page that includes all of the journal entries. Let's see what mine looks like, because maybe I typed something wrong. Quite possible. That doesn't look great. Not supposed to look like this, just to be clear. Yeah, Nathan. In index.ejs? Oh, it is. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, you saved me a lot of time. So here on line 35, at least in my code, where we have the CSS rules for the entry class, it is actually the entries class, is how I named it. You should be able to make that change, save it, switch back to Chrome, refresh. That's not quite what we want either. Boy, I am struggling today. All right, let's see. What else did I do wrong with the... I probably wrote my HTML wrong. Let me look more closely at that. They're all supposed to show up on separate lines, just so you know what we're going for here. So div class entries, for each entry, I have entry date, competency, content. Here's the button. I think my div's in the wrong place. I think I'm missing a div. Oh. All right. I understand what I did wrong. Okay, so I just totally missed this yesterday. These 4 divs, think of them as like the 4 cells in a given row. We need to group them all together in another div that would be like the div for the entire row, which we can style. So what I missed here is after the for loop, I need to create another div, and this is actually where I had class entry. So this is the div, this is the div associated with which all these 4 will be in, and then I'll close it here. So they're saving it, reformats it. These 4 divs, element, competency, content, edit button, are all inside this div of class entry. So that's why in styles.css, I actually had this as entry, because it was the rule for a row, not the rule for all the rows. I knew something seemed off there. Let me refresh quick and make sure there is. Oh, that looks so much better. Okay, and as I resize, do we see it do the right thing? I don't see any competencies. Man, we have to do all the debugging today. That part looks good. Getting closer. Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah. I should explain. I need to clean up this database. It still has data from last year, and I tried to delete it, and it didn't let me, and I'm not entirely sure why. And then I forgot last night to fix that. So I will delete old entries from the database. But also, here's another tip. So while we're at this, well, here, I'll show you the tip in a second. Let's do one more thing with this code and then wrap up this mini lesson. Then I'll share the tip. Okay, so our stuff shows up down here, which is great. You might only want to display your journal entries. You can totally do that in router.js, where we're doing entry.find. In the lab practicum, we pass query parameters here, right? So you could find just those entries that are associated with your email, for example. And you'll do something related to this in the lab in a moment as well. But like, you can certainly do that. All right, there's one last thing I want to show you, which is right now, switching back to Chrome, if I try to edit one of my entries, I just get an error. But I wanted to kind of show you what happens here. This link, if I hover over this, it's slash edit. If you look in the bottom left of my Chrome window, I know it's small, it says slash edit entry, and then it has like 69399 something. That's the object ID for the journal entry. We're using that as a unique way to identify each journal entry. When I click on the edit button, it does a get request for edit entry in that ID, which is great, but we don't have any code to respond to this. And if you think about it, it would be infeasible to write code to respond to every possible object ID because we don't know what they are. So the last thing I'm going to show you today is how we can write, how we can respond to a get request where part of the path is like a variable. And this is really like the last skill you need to be successful for the summative lab. So if we go back to router.js, we're going to add another route at the end. So here near the end, after create entry and before our exports, we're going to do route.get like we're accustomed to doing. And we're going to do slash edit entry. That's familiar. But then we don't know, like we want to handle all the object IDs, not just hard code them. And the way we can do that with Express routers is do a colon followed by ID. And what this means is match anything after the slash and assign that to the variable ID that we can then use in our code. So this is really, really powerful. So now we can write the arrow function, and it's going to need to be asynchronous because we're going to use the database eventually, or we're going to use it right now. So just like everything, takes a request and a response parameter. And then we're going to use the ID to look up the specific journal entry that we're going to want to edit eventually. So I'm going to say const entry equals await entry dot find by ID, which is a Mongo method, or technically a Mongoose method that we haven't used before. And this variable ID here, the word after the colon, shows up as a variable, shows up as a property under the request parameters with the same name. So this ID is why I can say this ID here. If this was called banana, this would have to be banana. Okay, these two are the same. For now, we're just going to say console.log entry. And then we're going to send the entry back just as like text. In the summative lab, you're going to do more with this. You're going to actually implement the edit entry page where you can edit an entry and change the values and save it again and all of that. But for now, we're just going to do this because I wanted to demonstrate how we can embed a variable in our path and then get at it through rec.params. So now if I switch back to Chrome, go back to our home page, refresh for good measure, and then click on one of these edit things, we can see that here's just the JSON for the object. Here's the ID, the dates, all the stuff. If I look at the inspector in the console, I guess I need to have that open first. Let me hit edit again. There's navigation stuff. Still treating this like a phone. I got to turn that off. There we go. All better. Cool.